Well, hello everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to episode 5 of Stellar series on what brands need to know. I'm Brandon Hegel. I'm the Chief Digital Officer here at Stellar Rising. I hope you're all doing well and thank you for joining us today. So this week, we're going to start off with a brief overview of what we're seeing in our data and research during these unique times. And then after that, we're going to move on to the main agenda where we're going to be discussing a cutting edge approach to search engine optimization called Edge SEO. Joining me for that discussion is our very own John Morabito, the SEO Director at Stellar Rising. John leads our award-winning SEO team, keeps his fingers on the pulse of the industry at all times, and he's going to walk us through exactly what Edge SEO is, why it's important, and how your business can benefit. Then at the end, John's going to answer questions at the end of the session if we have any time left over. So please submit them in the panel as we go. But of course, feel free to reach out to John or me anytime with questions about SEO or the digital landscape as it changes in general, things that may come to mind. So we look forward to this conversation. Let's get it going. We're going to get started. And from there, John's going to jump in just a few minutes. So the first thing we want to start off with is sharing with you what we're seeing across our clients. At Stellar Rising, we have an exposure to a number of different verticals. We're more heavily exposed to the beauty vertical, to the CPG vertical, especially food and beverage, and also have some retail and business services clients that we work with. But what we're seeing are, for the most part, some consistent trends across consumer behavior and media consumption, but also there's some uniqueness to what we're seeing in terms of performance and how things are changing within those verticals. So the first thing we're seeing that's pretty consistent is a decrease in media costs and advertising demand overall. But at the same time, that's leading to increased available inventory, so especially video. So as consumers are home, we're seeing a lot of video consumption. We're seeing a lot of people on social consuming video as well, especially going live and things of that nature, but especially seeing, YouTube and streaming video and Hulu and Netflix and those types of things, given people are home, they're spending a lot more time. So we've got this divergence happening where there's more inventory as people consume more, especially with some certain segments of the industry pulling out of advertising more aggressively. Obviously, those that are more impacted by COVID, like travel and hospitality and especially retail. So in addition to that, we're also seeing social metrics are leveling off back to pre-COVID levels. So as we've watched the last several weeks of this coronavirus pandemic, what we've seen is that a lot more engagement was happening within social, especially, increased metrics in terms of use, in terms of completed videos, in terms of more efficient CPCs and CPMs. But we're starting to see that start to level off now in the last week or so, back to the pre-COVID levels. In terms of what we're seeing where there's areas of strength, beauty, especially skincare, and health and wellness are areas where we're continuing to see strength. I think as she continues to, prioritize her rituals and self-care and things that help her feel good and cope, especially within these anxious times, we're seeing strong growth there, especially in beauty and also with smaller DTC brands. As those brands are built on driving transactions through e-commerce, we're seeing strong revenue growth in those two areas. On the converse side, luxury and large ticket expenditures remain challenged. So we're seeing that, certainly things like appliances or luxury goods, apparel also as a segment are certainly being challenged at this time. So the only other area that we didn't touch on, health and wellness, food and beverage, is entertainment, where we're seeing a lot of consumer behavior and investment. So the one segment of electronics that's doing well are certainly things like mobile devices, AirPods and things that are helping people stay connected and communicate. There is an increased investment there as well. The other thing that we're seeing across our clients is, in general, a lot of development resources are becoming more constrained. So as businesses are reprioritizing their investments and where they put their money right now, that a lot of development resources are being scaled back, and some of those projects are being pushed down as not being seen necessarily as mission critical. So what we're going to be talking about today in terms of Edge SEO is very timely for that reason, because as John's going to talk about, there's a lot of opportunity to still push forward with a lot of your SEO improvements that can help your visibility and your SEO results without needing to tax decreased availability of development resources. So taking a closer look at some of the trends we're seeing, within Stella Rising, and this is just within our client base, overall, we're seeing e-commerce revenues gone up. So that's consistent in general. There's about a 15% increase in e-commerce revenue overall in the marketplace, and that's excluding grocery. So not surprisingly, as consumers shift their purchase behaviors online by not going into physical retail, especially those retail chains that are closed, they're finding their purchases directly through e-commerce, which is not surprising. So for our beauty e-commerce clients, we're seeing an uptick of about 34.5%. And you can see that dark line indicates transaction revenue, and you can see what the trends look like going back to March 7th through April 25th. So you can see it's, there was some peaks and valleys along the way as consumer behavior and panic sort of happened and people were trying to figure out what to do. And now you see things moving to more of a normalized growth line, right? If you look at the trend there. E-commerce, on the other hand, as we look at retail, we're seeing a decline in the prior period of about 29.5%. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some bright spots, with DTC, smaller DTC brands. There are brands that are beating plan and they're looking to invest more. But as we look at a lot of other segments of retail, that have fallen out of favor, we are seeing some weakening there, which again is not surprising. Consumers are watching more videos, we talked about earlier, than ever before, as everybody's effectively home, nearly 24/7. And what we're seeing there is that ultimately all that video consumption is leading to higher video completion rates and lower cost per completed view metrics. So we're, again, seeing more opportunity, more engagement, and more efficiency. And over the past year, boosted post engagement in social has been on the rise and continues since COVID-19 started. It's remained strong with almost 2 times stronger than a year ago and flat over the prior week period. And lastly, as we look at some of the Google and social platforms, we're also seeing consistency in terms of the metrics across our client base, going the way that we would anticipate, which is we're seeing, click-through rates are up, cost per click is down, and ultimately, it's consistent across all aspects of Google and social within our client base. And as you can see in some of those charts to the right, the one thing that you'll notice is how there is a little bit of a leveling off in terms of what we've seen in performance back to pre-COVID levels, as I touched on earlier. So with that said, we're going to shift to the main agenda, which is to talk about Edge SEO and why it's beneficial for your business. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John and his perspective on what Edge SEO is and why it's important.
All right, well, thank you for that introduction, Brandon. As Brandon mentioned, my name is John Morabito, and I'm the Director of SEO here at Stella Rising. So to start off with, what is Edge SEO? Edge SEO is the process of optimizing and testing websites using serverless technologies known as workers to execute JavaScript bundles on the edge of the cloud. So what does that mean? So it is essentially the concept of using Cloudflare or Akamai workers to sit between the server and the end user. It's there in the cloud that we implement our critical SEO changes that maybe for one reason or another we couldn't implement into the website directly itself. Then when a user tries to access your website, they get the version of your website that delivers these changes to their browser. And in that sense, Google also receives these changes the same way that a user would. So Edge SEO actually enables us in many ways to overcome some common SEO challenges that can be pitfalls in the traditional SEO engagement. So the first of which Brandon mentioned earlier, which is limited developer resources. And in a time where everyone is watching every dollar that they spend, this is something that can be really critical. Costly implementations is another aspect of this, limited understanding of impact, the fact that SEO can take a while, and CMS platform limitations. And we're going to go through each of these things. So first off, as I mentioned before, limited developer resources. Developer resources are increasingly hard to come by, and very often when we come into a situation, developers have a many months long queue of prioritized tasks that maybe are directly revenue impacting or things that are critical to functionality of the website that sort of get prioritized ahead of SEO work that in the long run can actually deliver a lot of traffic to the website, but isn't prioritized today based on its sort of limited understanding of impact. And so this can overall make SEO changes hard to implement, even when you have a consultant sort of putting those changes forward for you. So Edge SEO can help by taking the load off developers by enabling marketing teams to actually implement these changes. Another thing is, if you do have the resources to invest in SEO changes, ultimately they can be costly. And time is money. So a single title tag or meta description or redirect can take anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes to implement, depending on the CMS platform. Edge SEO tools enable us to make changes in a spreadsheet, meaning that implementation of one title tag is actually as easy as us implementing 1,000. So this can lead to a tremendous cost savings when it comes to developer resource allocation, as well as time spent on your SEO team. The other sort of common complaint around SEO is that it takes too long. So traditional SEO can take anywhere from 3 to 12 months to see impact. Edge SEO enables us to work in what's called an agile workflow that delivers results faster. And this sort of agile workflow was coined by one of the tool partners the SEO agile workflow was coined by one of the tool partners that we're going to talk about in a minute. But essentially the concept here is that in traditional SEO process, you would start off with an audit. We would make recommendations. These recommendations would then be implemented by development team. The development team would QA those recommendations. Your SEO team would QA those recommendations, and then we would deploy them to production. This could take any number of weeks to actually make its way through the queue. The agile SEO process enables us to use tools, including the Edge SEO tools we're going to talk about in a minute, or our own other tools that we standardly sort of use throughout the process to audit websites, make recommendations. We can actually validate these recommendations, implement them, review, deploy, and then sort of execute this in more of a sprint agile manner than waiting for things to make their way through the development queue. It is important to note that once we sort of prove out our changes, it oftentimes does make sense to have developers actually implement these things onto the website. However, in some situations where there are platform limitations or severe developer resource allocation issues, we can basically use these technologies to make it be the sort of end all to the implementation. The other common challenge that we have in SEO is, with the exception of our understanding of best practices, what Google has said to us, and our previous experience in what we've done on other websites and what we've seen to be successful, very often we have a fairly limited understanding of impact before we actually implement something. Very often we're right, but there can be a lot of work done in a certain direction before actually understanding whether or not that's going to be impactful. And so these Edge SEO technologies enable us to actually A/B test changes, which gives us visibility into proving out suggested changes, which can help us to move things faster in the right direction. So an example I like to use here is, let's say that we are a really, really big e-commerce website, and we have a theory that our title tags are not as descriptive as they should be, but we have 10,000 products. And so for us to invest the time and effort to put descriptive titles on 10,000 products, it's going to be a pretty big initiative. And before executing that, we want to prove out that this is going to work for us. So using these tools, we can basically identify a control group of pages, we can identify a test group of pages, we can implement a given template or a given type of meta optimization for those pages, and then actually understand which set of pages is performing better using the insight section of one of these tools that we're going to talk about in a minute. This is actually rank sense. So this helps us to, as I said, understand before we make the investment of spending a lot of time on a particular SEO change, whether or not something's going to actually be impactful for you. And then really one of the key reasons that a lot of people might lean toward these types of solutions is that certain CMS platforms completely limit certain implementations. There might be no way to do them, or it might be extremely expensive or costly, or you might have to sort of tear down and rebuild certain parts of your CMS in order to accomplish certain things. So when this happens, developers, as I said, are often sort of left with no other option but to make a really costly change to the platform to enable certain SEO implementations. This concept of Edge SEO basically helps us to overcome that by providing what some are calling a meta CMS, basically a CMS platform that sits between your website, the server, and the end user. So what are some of the things that we can implement through Edge SEO? Robots.txt is a file that controls the way that bots are able to crawl through your website, and we can completely control and implement robots.txt through these technologies. We can control canonical tags. We can implement robots meta tags to, again, control crawling and indexing. We can adjust meta titles, as I mentioned before, to basically help with relevance, and meta descriptions and H1 tags are along that same lines of basically increasing relevance for your pages, bettering your click-through rate within search results. A lot of the common on-page and even technical things that we make recommendations around coming out of a technical audit can be accomplished through Edge SEO. There are some limited things, or not even limited, but there are a number of things that are best done in your platform natively. For instance, if you're an e-commerce store, you're not going to use Edge SEO to create category pages, as an example. That's something that you're going to need to do on your side. But you can use Edge SEO to dress up those category pages by adding things like meta tags or H1s. The other thing that we can do with Edge SEO that is often a challenge for us is the collection of log file data. So in SEO, we're often hypothesizing about the way that Google will crawl, index, move through our website. And with the use of basically log file or request log file, we can see the way that Google actually interacts with the website. So one of the tools we're talking about today, RankSense, it natively has log file collection and will give you information about the way that Google's moving through the website. The other tool that we're going to talk about, Sloth.cloud, enables you to basically log this data and then collect it in your own database. And we are big fans of both of those methodologies. And then one of the other cool things that you can do is also do what we call dynamic pre-rendering of JavaScript pages. So there's been sort of a push and an evolution of web technologies, leaning many bigger dynamic websites in the direction of creating their websites on JavaScript frameworks, often React, Node, frameworks that are ostensibly single page applications. They function more like an app than a website from a technology perspective. Google will crawl and index these types of websites, and in most cases, they can get most of the information off of these pages. However, in many cases, we find issues with Google's discoverability of content on these types of websites because of the way that Google basically interacts with the code, to sort of sum that up. These technologies enable us to use Edge SEO workers to basically create a pre-rendered version that is static HTML that is fed to Google instead of the JavaScript version of your page, which would instead be fed to Google. This enables Google to more readily crawl, render, index, and basically grab your content, and it does help with ranking in that sense. So if you're looking to get started leveraging these technologies, first off, it does require that you're using a CDN. So you want to look at whether or not you're currently using Cloudflare or Akamai. We use Cloudflare for most of these implementations. The other thing is that there are two tools that we use to accomplish this. So in essence, the concept of Edge SEO is not proprietary to any tool necessarily. You can implement JavaScript bundles into service workers without any tool as your intermediary. However, these tools, Sloth.cloud and RankSense, basically enable you to do that in a way that is familiar to a lot of us. So spreadsheets, sort of like a general user interface where you can punch in this stuff to basically implement changes on your website. Now, with that said, step 3 here is you want to be doing this first off in collaboration with your developers. Edge SEO is a way to work in collaboration with developers. It is not something that should be used to sort of throw out your developers or get around them. It is something to take work off their plate where they have more high priority items to work on. It's something to use to test out changes, or it's something to use to get around platform limitations that simply cannot be overcome. So you want to work with developers, but you also want to work with an SEO team. So reach out to us. We can help you get set up with these technologies. We can help you to overcome any existing challenges you have on your website in terms of implementation. Very often we'll talk to folks and they'll have executed audits with other agencies in the past, and really they didn't get a whole lot of it because they weren't able to implement a lot of it. We can be very impactful by coming in and helping you to get that stuff on the site. So in addition to that, if you are stuck not only with implementation, but overall strategy, do reach out and we can do what we call an opportunity analysis. We'll let you know where we see opportunity for your overall search campaigns, and we can basically set up a call to go through that with you. So at that, we'll sort of pass it back to Brandon and we can take some questions from the audience here.
Yes, thanks, John. Appreciate that. It does look like we have one question that came through, and certainly if anyone else has questions, feel free to post those now. The question is, Edge SEO sounds like a cure-all for many SEO implementation woes. Are there any areas of SEO that stand out as challenges to implement with Edge SEO?
Yeah, absolutely. So I sort of began to touch on it before, but essentially content creation, I would say, is sort of one of the areas I would advise against using Edge SEO for. In many cases, if you are, let's say, creating a blog post on your website, or you are creating a product page or a category page on your website, it's probably best to be doing that within your CMS platform. And we very seldom come across those types of challenges. So I would say that it's more along the lines of content creation or the launching of new pages is something that theoretically could be done, but really is probably not best done with these technologies. And again, the tools themselves do not afford the capability to do that. It's really more over the concept that if you can insert JavaScript into a worker and manipulate the code before it gets delivered, you could theoretically do anything, but much of it is not advisable, right? And so the things that we've listed here today in terms of title tag, meta description, H1, those are the things that you really want to focus on being able to implement. Outside of that, it's really best done within your platform.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Well, if there's no further questions, then we want to thank you all for joining us today. Of course, please reach out to John if you have any specific questions or areas of need related to SEO, or you can reach out to me and the Stellarizing team if there's any questions, or anything we can do to help you in terms of research, strategy, or certainly execution with media. So thanks again. Please join us next Friday when Google's Tatiana Bertolo Blanco and our very own Anthony Vespucci are going to be discussing current consumer trends within Google and how our e-commerce strategy team is responding to those. So without further ado, we thank you and hope you all have a wonderful, safe weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.